All right, guys, welcome back to class. There's some class updates I need to give you. What my plan for today is, I'm going to give you an essay prompt on the drama unit that we just finished. Or I did give you the essay prompt last time, did I not?
Yeah, you did.
I did.
Yeah, you showed it to us. Is it up on Blackboard yet?
I might not have posted it to Blackboard. That might be what I've not have done. So I will post that to Blackboard today, since you guys reminded me. So yeah, remember the questions are on Twelfth Night, Lear, or Dr. Faustus, whichever text it is that interested you the most. So you guys all had feedback on your first one a week or two ago. So you know what to do as far as developing and all that good stuff goes. So yeah, if you want more about that, watch the video from last class that we did when we finished up 12th night, because I remember we talked about it then.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Dale.
All right, I didn't have audio. Sorry about that.
So then the next few classes, we're reading Paradise Lost, so 2 books at a time. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think after that we're going to 9 and 10. So I think we're spending 3 classes on Paradise Lost. Okay, I'm open to. I might think about next week gutting a day of something else just so we can do 5 and 6 too, because 5 and 6 are really interesting parts of this. Depends how much you guys like the poem, I guess. Well, that's how I'll make that call based off of that. Yeah, 5 and 6 is when it actually flashes back to the war in heaven, which is really cool. So yeah, moving forward very fast. The semester's rapidly winding down. So
I have a quick question.
okay.
I know we were supposed to have a test, but like wherever it's supposed to be uploaded on the Blackboard for the assignments and the prompts, I don't have anything uploaded on there. When was that supposed to be there?
A test. So are you talking about the midterm?
No, I thought last week that you were showing us a paper or something that we were supposed to write. Was I off on that?
Yeah, I just now remember that I actually talked about that last class. I'll have that uploaded today. The prompt.
Oh, okay.
That's my bad. Yeah, so I'll have that up.
Okay, because I've been looking for it for a couple days. I didn't know if it was me or not.
It was me. Yeah, this keeping up with all these different Blackboard shells is maddening. I think I've updated them, but then I haven't. I need a secretary is what I need. I think Southern needs to put out. So but yeah, I'll have that up today. So without further ado, then let's get started talking about Milton's Paradise Lost. So God, where to even start with talking about Milton? Again, I told you guys before, he is among the most respected of writers in the English canon. Usually it's some type of list of Shakespeare, Chaucer, and Milton as far as the big 3 in English literature. Milton, I told you guys about before, it's hard to talk about Paradise Lost without talking about the English Civil War, because John Milton was such a big part of it. But I told you guys before, as the 17th century progressed, that the conflict between Parliament and the king intensified. Right? Parliament was especially ruled by the radical Calvinists group. Right, the Calvinists who had moved to America, right, who believed in predestination They did not believe in a lot of pomp and ceremony in the church. Probably the best comparison to draw from the 17th century Calvinists would be like the old Baptists today, right? People that had like no music in church and things like that. So these types of people kind of took over in Parliament. And I'm very much simplifying history here, but Parliament would butt heads with the king, who came from the Stuart line, right? You had James the first starting, and then you had a couple of kings after him. But the Stuarts family exhibited Catholic sympathies and all this. And it eventually led to the overthrow of the king. They overthrew the king in like 1660, thereabouts. And for a brief period of time in England was ruled as a dictatorship, right? The Parliament overthrew the king, but then they instilled a dictator in power. The dictator's name was Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell. He called himself the Lord Protector of England. That time period in England's known as the interregnum. The interregnum. And that was that brief time period where there was no monarch, and Parliament really had no power either. It was complete dictatorship. John Milton's role in all of this was he and Cromwell were pretty good chums, right? Milton was pretty much the director of communications almost for the interregnum, during the interregnum period. So he was, in a nutshell, he was Cromwell's propaganda minister. So Paradise Lost was written after the restoration of the monarchy came, after they instilled a king back, after Cromwell was disposed. So Milton wrote this poem in as he was sort of banished almost from public life. So whenever we talk about Satan today in these discussions of liberty and freedom and all this stuff from a tyrannical God, right? A lot of scholars think that rhetoric embodies a lot of the same rhetoric that Cromwell gave, against the English monarch. So whenever we talk about the monarchy of God, right, oftentimes in this we can draw a parallel between the monarchy of England. So that's one little bit of detail for you. But Milton himself was a very prolific poet. We talked before about Shakespeare and how Shakespeare didn't have a great education, right? So people say, how could Shakespeare have written what he wrote? Well, Milton did have a great education. This guy knew tons of languages, Greek, Hebrew, Latin, all this stuff. He was very well read. Early in his life, he made a declaration. He said, I'm going to write the great English epic. So early in his life, he read stuff like the Iliad and the Aeneid and Dante's Inferno and stuff like this. And the English language really had not had a great epic. Beowulf doesn't really count because they hadn't really discovered it yet. Right? Remember that at this point, Beowulf hadn't been discovered. So hence we had this poem, Paradise Lost. And yeah, I mean, he did it. I mean, this poem follows all the conventions of the epic genre. So one convention is the invocation. So just to give you a bit about epic drama, one convention in the epic drama is the poet at the beginning always says, this subject that I'm taking up is too big for me to handle. I can't wrap my mind around, such a crazy concept. We're talking about we're talking about God and the devil and all this stuff. Nicole actually made a good mention of this on the discussion board, talking about hell. I think Milton was actually blind. So, like Homer, right? It's like Homer, he was actually blind. So, his blindness perhaps gives him an interesting insight into hell. But we have an invocation to the muse. We have larger than life characters. That's another convention of the epic, as we know from Beowulf, right? Lots of allusions to classical literature and Greek mythology and stuff like that in here. I'll be especially interested to know what you guys think about how Milton appropriates Greek mythology into Christianity here. I don't know if you guys noticed that in book 1, but he pretty much says that all the Greek gods were devils, right? Impersonating, in the Greek mythology, he says they were all devils, right? So
He lumps in several Egyptian gods too. I think Isis and Osiris was down there.
right, yeah. So I've always appreciated how he's like, yeah, they're just devils, right? Impersonating God. Right, so yeah, that's in here, of course. So the big question about this poem, especially in book 1 and 2, is of course about this character Satan. Right? Satan becomes very much a literary character in this poem. Gets lots of development here that he actually doesn't really even get in the Bible, which is something we will discuss. But as we'll find out, this story is a retelling of the Genesis story, the Adam and Eve fall from Eden. Book 1 and 2 sets it up. I'm talking about how Satan's going to Eden. Book 2, of course, is about how they decide that that's what they're going to do to get back at God. Just to go to Eden and corrupt man. So we're going to have lots of good discussions about this over the next few classes. Whenever we talk about this poem, predestination is a concept that we have to wrap our minds around. Right? That'll come up more Wednesday whenever we talk about, because Satan actually has this nice little soliloquy even where he's like, why can't he talks about how he can't in his nature ask for forgiveness, right? And so a lot of the stuff with predestination in this poem, it also invokes the question, should we feel sympathy for the devil in this poem? I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say about this subject. As far as that goes, different people have read this way differently over time. Milton's audience, probably 30 or 40 years after the poem came out, was the Romantic poets. If you take British Lit 2, you'll read a bunch of the Romantic poets. But you had poets like Coleridge, Wordsworth, Lord Byron, Percy Shelley. Of course, Percy Shelley was Mary Shelley's husband. Of course, you guys know Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. In Frankenstein, the creature, his first ever book that he reads is Paradise Lost. Right? So he finds lots of connections between himself and Satan and how they're both spurned by their creator. Right? So, but they all read Satan as very sympathetic. Right? That this is a text where we should feel sympathy for the devil. He's mistreated. His rhetoric about liberty and freedom and all this stuff. This is stuff that we can resonate with. However, as time has gone on, other people have delivered other different readings. C.S. Lewis, the great Christian writer, has written a lot about this subject. He talks about how Satan sort of ropes you in almost with this rhetoric, but a lot of this is empty rhetoric. He's really not interested in freedom and liberty and all this stuff. He's more interested in having his own tyrannical system in hell, right, where he's king and monarch. So Lewis has written a lot about it. So there's actually an interesting book by another writer called Stanley Fish called Surprised by Sin. And it actually talks about, that book actually talks about how in book 1 and 2 of Paradise Lost, like Satan is portrayed perhaps sympathetically, but then Milton kind of draws the curtain back and is oftentimes like, are you sure? Are you sure you're sympathetic here? Right? There's a few passages here that illustrate that. And then, of course, we get these descriptions of Satan as this big titan almost here. And then the further we go through the text, this is something to pay attention to. But the further we go through the text, Satan becomes more and more pathetic as we go on. He's painted in book 1 of Paradise Lost as being like this big titan in the early descriptions. But then as we go on, he eventually has to become a snake. Right? So he degenerates almost the further we go through the poem. So that's just a bit of lead in to this. Let's see what you guys think now. What was your Milton? So I'll ask you guys your general reading impressions. But Milton is definitely not an easy read, but I've always found him a very rewarding read. I know you guys are interested in this subject. Most of our great discussions in this class so far have involved Christianity to some extent. Well, we might as well call this class Christian literature about Christianity. Right? That's early English lit in a nutshell, almost. Right? But what do you guys think of Paradise Lost so far? We can start with general impressions and then go perhaps to the sympathy for the devil question.
So far, I've really enjoyed it. You know, like you said, it's definitely not an easy read, but it is very rewarding. And just in the way it's written, I found a lot of resemblance to just the cadence of the way that we read the Bible, and like a lot of resemblance in just the pace, I guess you would say. And I for one really, really enjoy it. And you know, I really didn't think about Milton's ties to the monarchy. I didn't connect that, but looking back on my initial read through, that's definitely something that's prevalent, and it's definitely something we can look at. Like whenever they first get to hell and they're talking about how they're almost regretful of what they've lost and about how they're miserable because they're not in glory and grace anymore. And it made me think that is probably exactly what Milton was feeling whenever he was thrown out of society at that point after the reforming of the monarchy. You know, he had this very high station where he had a lot of privileges that came with that. And so did Satan and the other angels that had fallen. They were in heaven, they had a lot of privileges, and then they're cast out and just totally on their own.
Right. So yeah, so now that I mentioned that, I draw this connection, especially these discussions of liberty and having freedom from a tyrant and all this stuff. Okay, you're drawing these connections. Other general impressions so far.
My favorite line is the one that says, "The mind is its own place, and it and in itself can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven." I think that kind of goes along with what Nicole was saying, because like Milton, like with his situation, you can make something out of a situation, and I think that's kind of what Satan had done here. Like he accepted his fate, and he's like, okay, I'm going to make the best out of this that I can.
Right. That's an interesting definition of hell that you even just said, Kelsey. Right. That hell is within the mind, even. That's a very similar line to Dr. Faustus, right? Remember in Dr. Faustus when Mephistopheles said, any place that isn't heaven is hell. It's a very similar line. That is a very famous, iconic line from the poem that you just quoted us. Other general thoughts so far?
Yeah, I'm really digging this. Yeah, the first several pages, I think Nicole mentioned something about the cadence. Yeah, but as soon as I got into a groove, it was very natural to me. The first book, it's okay. I mean, I appreciate it, but the second book, when the Council of Demons and all that, and then after they decide Satan's going to be the one to champion this, which is the obvious choice. His journey through the hellscape, no pun intended. You talk about him being a titan. I think it's cool how they refer to him as half flying. They mentioned it a couple of times. I guess he's so big and so powerful that his feet almost drag, it seems like, across, as he's gliding through. But one of the questions you was talking, how he ends up, the gates of hell itself are guarded by sin and death. Okay, and the way it's described is fascinating in itself. And I like how it talks about there was three gates of brass, and then like 3 of iron, maybe, and then 3 of adamantium, I think it is. But so you mentioned that sin and death was his offspring. Is that what you say in your question there?
They are, right.
Okay, I didn't see. I'd like for you to explain that a little bit to me there later on. I know it's just general impressions, but I thought they were just simply. I like how he beats them with philosophy, and he's not scared one bit. I thought that was really cool. And, they ultimately let him pass, and then he goes into the great beyond. And Milton, how he describes, I really like his idea of how this universe is. He's got heaven here, per se. You got earth, Eden, whatever you want to call it, and then hell. And then this just great void of nothingness, which he calls the eternal night. And I think it's mainly controlled by chaos. But and then he names some other entities and stuff in there too. I don't know if that's just, proverbial or what have you. But, I think chaos is the ultimate king. But it's just neat. And he said it's all linked by gold chains. And I think I read an annotation that has something to do with Zeus, something to do with some type of Greek something. I just thought that was really fascinating. Sorry for the rant.
No, that's a great subject in the poem too, right? The Milton's cosmology and his universe. Right. So they actually, in this time period, they actually viewed it almost in like a top to bottom type of thing, right? Heaven, of course, is on top. They oftentimes call that the firmament, right? That's when you talk about like the golden chains and stuff, right? They say that heaven's the firmament. Almost under heaven is earth. Right. And then in Milton's cosmology, you have this whole void, right, called chaos. Right. And chaos is actually personified here, right, as Dale just said. And then of course hell is at the very bottom of it all. So part of the connection this text will make is how do the demons even get from hell to earth? All right, that's something that we'll figure out as we progress. Yeah, I've always found the chaos thing really interesting too, especially whenever we talk about like colonization and stuff. Satan pretty much colonizes a big part of chaos, right, to even get to earth. Chaos even seems to be ruled separately from God. God molds creation out of chaos, right? But it seems like chaos is even separate from God in a way, which is interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was super fascinating. I'm a nerd. Like I've read quite a bit, and I've never really seen this chaos realm really described when it comes to these subjects. And I thought that was neat. I mean, the biggest part of Satan's journey was actually trying to traverse that. I think he even has to kind of submit to him and say, hey, you can keep on controlling this. I don't want nothing. This ain't my domain. I'm trying to get here, you know, and this, that, and the other. You know, you can continue to be, this is yours. You know what I mean? I like that.
He has to stop.
Yeah.
He has to stop at the gas station and ask for directions.
One thing that I caught that I found really interesting, you know, talking about how they describe just the alignment of things, you know, how you have heaven and then you have the firmament and then you have all the chaos, earth, and then you have hell, is how earth is the center of that. And at the time that this was written, a lot of astrologists and stuff still believe that the earth was the center of the universe, and that was a connection that I made. And back to what you said about all the gates at the edge of hell, Dale, what I thought when I read that, you know, humans to get to hell, you have to encounter sin as an action on earth, and you have to die. And I found it really interesting that those two were the ones that are guarding the gates. And also the amount of gates that were there. It's like you have to do so much, and you have to do enough to get through all of those gates to even get into hell if you're a human, is what I thought about.
Hey, one thing to add to that too, I'm sure it'll come into play later on in this epic, but you know, man's not even created yet. So I'm guessing in Milton's eye, God had already planned for what you just said. That makes perfect sense, having to go through sin and then to die. But also, if you look down in the, it was annotated down at the bottom that Satan, along with sin and death, created the anti-Trinity, the antithesis to God, the Godhead. I thought that was a nice little add down there. It makes perfect sense.
Oh yeah, I agree with you there. And as far as the chaos goes, something that I found interesting is that in a lot of Christian literature, you know, it is stated, it is fact in that literature that God created everything. And the chaos in this is set up almost as something that pre-existed God, that was not his creation, that was there before, and that he had to draw out of. And I just find that very, very interesting, because a lot of times people believe and write God as all-knowing, all-powerful, the creator of everything. And this idea that there was something that pre-exists him is just so interesting. And I think it adds to the story so much, and it almost takes away a little bit from his power, I guess you could say.
Hey, I love that thought. Like, I'm very intrigued by chaos. I hope it's revisited several times throughout the rest of this. Whether we read it or not, I'll probably read it myself. Yeah, I'd be very curious. You know, most people, when you bring up God, you know, who created him? You know, if he's a creator, who created him? But you know, you can't answer that whether you believe or not. But yeah, this idea that chaos isn't bound by the same rules as everybody else is very interesting. I hope that's explored a little bit more going forward.
Now I'm thinking back, I don't think he, besides book 2, I don't think he talks about it too much more. I mean, you got Nicole already predicted how things will end, right? But sin and death actually build a bridge through chaos from hell to earth, right? And that's how the demons can transverse, you know, this plane of existence. So, but yeah, so in a way, the sin and death colonize a part of chaos to build this bridge through it to earth.
Does chaos allow that, or does it say how this happened?
I'm rereading with you, so that's a question I don't remember right off. So it does happen in book 9 and 10 though when we get to the end.
Okay,
You
so
know,
if sin and death end up building this bridge, is that when because I don't understand at this point in time in this epic how sin and death are Satan's offspring. It seems like he just happened to they happen to be in his way. You know, could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think it's in book 5 when they go back to the war in heaven. But at the moment that Satan first sins against God, you know, by planning to overthrow him, he gives birth to sin. Sin comes out of his head, right? And that references back to Zeus, because Athena was born from his head, right?
I did read that in that was in an annotation down at the bottom too, there in the book too. It talked about what you just described there.
As far as what you said about chaos, kind of allowing the bridge, I feel like, back to what I said about humans having to go through death and sin to get to hell, I feel like chaos, is definitely what allows death and sin to come to the earth. And also, I feel like chaos is indifferent. I feel like it doesn't care either way. I think that if, the fallen angels want to enact something, chaos isn't going to either help or stop them. It's just there to be used if they wish to use it, I feel like.
Right. Yeah, it's this whole realm, right? It's almost like this matter, right? It's all this matter that we can be crafted and molded any way that they want it to be.
I don't know. This is weird, probably bringing this up, but in Marvel, one of the Doctor Strange villains, Dormammu, I mean, that's his whole realm is the chaos realm. I wonder how much of this is like inspired by this. So it's just interesting knowing that this exists now. What all else what is inspired since this? I'm starting to see things.
Yeah, it is very interesting, Dell. And, even more on the theme of chaos, out of chaos comes balance. And before Satan had fallen, there wasn't balance. There was only good and chaos. And, whenever we see Satan fall and create sin, that's where balance is created. And I find that so very interesting.
Yeah, I think the antithesis of chaos is order usually.
Yeah, whenever we talk about chaos too, from a 21st century standpoint, right? You have to talk about physics too, right? Because quantum physics today suggests that, well, quantum physics discovered that there's actually a smaller particle in the universe than the atom, right? Which is like the quarks, right? So I'm very much simplifying quantum physics again, but quantum physics suggests that everything in the universe has been created almost out of chaos and chance. Right? So quantum physics goes against a lot of the ideas of Christianity from this respect, because it does suggest that everything that's happened, the earth, the rest of the universe, the Big Bangs, right, all of this has came out of random chance. So it's interesting how well the poem has aged as far as this goes.
Hey, speaking on quantum mechanics, do you subscribe to the multi-world theory? You're talking about chance there has like supposedly, in alternate worlds, I'm doing the same thing right now, but I'm making different decisions and they parallel each other and they're all cascading and happening cohesively.
Right. I think there's some merit to that.
That's something I've read up on, Dell, and something that I really enjoy considering, honestly. It's just so interesting to think, if I had chosen to say something else, that could be an alternate reality where things go completely different just from one choice or one different word phrase. But did anyone catch whenever they were having their discussion of what they were going to do before Satan decided to go and find Earth and figure out what the buzz was about the humans, how it was almost democratic in their discussion? Like, we see God painted as a tyrant who is, my way or the highway, pretty much. And then you have the fallen angels who are having this democratic discussion where everyone can contribute equally and their voices will be heard. And I find that so interesting, and I think it contributes to the common theme of sympathy for the fallen angels and for Satan, because a lot of times in the world, democracy is seen as inherently good. And I think that was just written really well if you're wanting to persuade people to be sympathetic for Satan.
Yeah, this Council of Demons is very interesting, but I don't know if it's so much a democracy. It's almost like a hierarchy of power, because it starts out with Moloch, and it immediately says he's the most powerful spirit after Satan. And then it kind of goes down from there. And then, ultimately, I think Beelzebub, who's Satan's right-hand man, is the one. But all their different philosophies and the things they say, like Baal, he says something I thought was really fascinating. He says, why don't we just try again? Because what could be worse than what we're suffering now? And he's basically saying that it would be better to fail and be ultimately destroyed than to suffer in agony for eternity. Thought that was really neat. And then Mammon, he says, unless we can completely overthrow the God on high, we're going to be up there subjugated to forever, praising him falsely with hate through these false hymns and these false hallelujahs for eternity. And it would just be a perpetual agony. None of us would be happy. So, that's not even an option.
I think that also about how Beelzebub says it would be better to not exist at all than to be there. I think that almost contributes to, hell being a mental thing, because, they are in hell right now, but they don't think that if they die, they're just going to stay there. They think that if their consciousness stops, then hell stops. And they even know that if they're in heaven, they'll still be mentally in hell.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of like ethereal beings right now. I don't think they have like corporeal flesh. Satan might once he gets to Eden, but I don't think our minds are necessarily meant to, Milton's creating a world here, obviously, but you kind of got to think about these characters differently. But I like to bring up Moloch, though, when we get a chance, because he's usually portrayed as an ancient pagan deity. I find it strange that he would even be able to fight in heaven, because he doesn't exist without man to begin with. So how's he fighting up? He's not an angel. Don't make sense to me, which I know this isn't, canonically 100% accurate to the Bible. This is another man's creation. But I just thought that was interesting.
On that, I think that could tie into what Dr. Yeager said about the appropriation of the other religions in this, because we see them pretty much account all other gods or all other deities that have been worshipped as devils that have interjected themselves into human society to smite God, I suppose you could say. And I really don't I didn't care for that. I didn't care for the appropriation. I think it was used well in the text, but I don't like, totally discrediting other cultures, because I think that things like that are very important to the way that things have developed now, and even to how Christianity has developed.
I get what you're saying for sure. Like, the Greek gods, and especially I think the Egyptian gods, I mean, they're not inherently evil. Like Anubis, for instance, he's indifferent. He's just the gatekeeper. He's a god, but he's indifferent. But Moloch, the reason I brought him up is interesting because he's never portrayed as anything but evil in all of literature that I've ever came across. But he's this pagan god of child sacrifice. Usually, it's always keeping him at bay by sacrificing children. I just thought it was strange that Milton added him and that he even would be in the fight in heaven to begin with.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Dell. And little bit different subject, but still kind of same ballpark. I find it interesting that, we haven't gotten there yet, but the idea that these fallen angels, these demons, are impersonating, other deities and other gods. If we look at what those other deities and other gods have done, they've not done inherently bad things always. Some of them have, but not all of them. And it's interesting because these demons, their goal isn't to just do evil. Their goal is to do things that will smite God. And even getting humans to worship someone other than God, other than the Christian God, is something that would kind of stop his plan or throw it off some way. And I find that really helpful to the sympathetic view of them, definitely, because, if we're buying into this and we're really in the universe, and all of these other gods are demons in disguise, then, if you're thinking on they're inherently evil, why would they do good things for the humans?
Well, here's the thing that I'll let somebody else talk after this. I feel like I'm ranting on like a lunatic, but evil itself is it's a perception of the mind. It's very subjective. What could be more evil, if you buy into it, than being as so petty as to take on this idea to bring the downfall of this new creation because that's the best way to get back at God? Is that not evil personified?
I definitely see your point there, Dale. Definitely. And I don't really know just as yet. I feel like once we read some more of the story, I'll definitely be able to have a better discussion with you on that.
Well, that's a good way to segue back into the question of sympathy for the devil here, right? Like, Kelsey, you want to get back into this because you mentioned Dante's Inferno and how Satan is portrayed in that too. You want to jump in here?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump into that. So, hold on a second. I'm reading my discussion post so I can collect my thoughts. Okay, so Dante's Satan means more of like a punishment kind of deal, and rather than Milton's symbol of God's eternal justice, like this is what God deserves. He deserves to be gone against, kind of. And I thought it was interesting too. I want to go back to the chaos thing because I found that interesting. Chaos was described in lines 890 through 897. The secrets of the hoary deep, a dark, illimitable ocean without bound, without dimension.
What
where
page
length,
are you on?
huh?
What page are you on?
68.
Oh, I was just reading off my post. I'll find it though.
Sorry, I did not mean to be rude there. I was just want to follow along with you.
No, you're fine. I was kind of paraphrasing, but I'll go ahead and find it.
Yeah, page 1768, line 890 is where she's at.
Hey, I'm tracking.
Okay. Before their eyes in sudden view appear the secrets of the hoary deep, a dark, illimitable ocean without bound, without dimension, where length, breadth, and height, and time and place are lost, where eldest night and chaos, ancestors of nature, hold eternal anarchy amidst the noise of endless wars and by confusion stand. So when it started mentioning like the ocean, and I think Dr. Yeager, you mentioned the firmament in Genesis, like the beginning, it talks about how God created the heavens and the earth, and he said, and God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. But anyways, so that kind of reminded me of that verse, and I just wanted to read that. But it also said that it was endless wars. So that kind of scares me. Like, I would not want to be in the midst of all of that. So I think that either Satan that was mentioned, or either hell, like Dante's hell and Dante's Satan is Dante's hell is kind of different, but neither of them sound enjoyable. And when I can't remember which lines it was, but in my post I mentioned he said that it was better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. But like either way, you're serving somebody. Like I would rather serve God because it's light and it's happy and all that, rather than being in torment for the rest of eternity. So that's kind of where I'm going to leave that off, and you guys can put in your opinion.
I definitely see what you're saying there, Kelsey. And I don't have a quote for it, but I know in the first book, once they first reach heaven, when they're first talking, they kind of admit that no matter what they do, it's still going to serve God's purpose. Like, even though they're doing bad and they're attempting to do bad, God's still going to be able to twist that around and to make it into his purpose, because if they go to earth and they bring sin to earth, then that's going to give humans the opportunity to repent. And I find it just this conflict of powers and this conflict of interest so interesting and really just so intriguing, because it's set up as if no matter what, they're going to fail, but they're still trying.
Yeah, I read ahead a little bit, and I don't know what the right adjective is, but it bothers me that God's completely aware of Satan's travels so far, as much as he goes ahead and starts talking to man, I don't know if he's for sure his son, Jesus Christ, as we'd ultimately end up knowing him, but and Jesus says, I'll go down there, and he allows it. It's just weird to me not weird, that's the wrong word, but God's completely aware of all this, yet it's happening. He's letting all this misery and suffering, and yes, we could debate this till to the end of time, but not a big fan.
Yeah, that'll be a whole can of worms next class in book 3. But Kelsey got us started there, right? That God, why would you, if you're going to serve somebody, why not God instead of the devil, right? I guess the question here stems from, and I know this seems like these are tough questions to ask, right? But is God inherently tyrannical, right? Like he creates mankind and the angels to serve him, right? They're glorifying him all the time. They're singing his praises. That's kind of like why Satan rebels, that we'll find out later, right? He kind of gets sick of, well, he gets jealous. He gets jealous because of Christ, right? He gets jealous that he's not the one picked instead of Christ. So jealousy comes in.
Didn't it also tie into, I could be wrong, I feel like I've read somewhere that he wanted humans to not have free will. He wanted to just be able to command humans and for them to do exactly what was said. Has that been written anywhere, or is it in the Bible? I'm not sure. I know that I have read it somewhere though.
Well, here in Paradise Lost, we get Adam and Eve. They're still in Eden, so they're still under God's. They have freedom of the will to do whatever they want in Eden. That's a discussion more for next class. Yeah, let's hold that one for next class.
You know what you were saying there, though, Dr. Yeager. That old saying. I mean, this has been, ran into the dirt. But if God is all knowing and all powerful, or all knowing and all powerful, he can't be all good. Very fitting.
I definitely, honestly, I agree with you there, Dale. It's a big question in philosophy too, the good God or the monstrous God, because shoot, I knew where I was going, but I've lost it. Continue. If it comes back to me, I will jump in when I get a chance, but I've lost it. Crap.
Hey, just a grammar thing I'd like to ask Dr. Yeager. He apostrophes a lot of his E's in this. I found that kind of unique.
Yeah, that's he does that to keep the meter of the lines going, right? He's writing this in free verse, so all of this poem is unrhymed iambic pentameter. This whole poem's written in iambic pentameter, but it's unrhymed.
Is it unstressed, stressed?
Yeah, the whole poem is.
Holy hell!
Whole poem is.
So is it 10 syllables a line too? I didn't go back and count.
Most lines are, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. It came back to me. Really, even in today, and even a lot of Christians today, we just take the Bible's word for it, that the intentions of Christianity are good and that the intentions of God are good. and we're really just taking his word for it. And, you know, we see a lot in the Bible that he is a jealous God. You know, he does not want anyone else worshipped. In the New Testament, we see a lot of terrible things, like, you know, if your children are disobedient, bash their heads in, I think is somewhere. And if you plant two crops beside each other, you should be stoned to death. And it's just like, how is this thought to be good? I mean, I get how it's thought to be good, and I get that a big part of Christianity is love and light, but seeing how people in the world today turn that around and twist that to their devices and their bigotry really makes you wonder.
Miss Nicole, you gotta have faith. You gotta have faith. It's all part of God's plan. He does
Come
nothing
on now,
without
Bill.
reason.
It's really a good discussion, and something that honestly, if we were in a college class right now and we were just out talking in some situation and brought it up, anyone who is a Christian would probably get really heated over it, honestly. And I found it really difficult to come to terms with that a lot of Christians don't even try to question things, not questioning as in like, you know, trying to outsmart God or something like that, but try to understand it better and questioning it, which is something that I, as a very curious person and as I like to think an intellectual person, do with everything. You know, I try to question everything all the time.
Yeah, I think that's fine as long as it comes from a good place. You know what I mean? I've talked about this before. You should never look down on somebody for their beliefs. You know, we all were raised very uniquely, nature and nurture, you know, separately. You know, I've got a lot of family that are very religious, and, you know, they live their lives by this, and I don't think any less of them. You know, it's commendable to a certain extent. You know what I mean? It just because it's not for me, I'm not going to bash somebody else for it. You know, I don't quite understand it, but I'm open to learn. You know, I think that's the difference. If we could all practice a little bit of temperance and understanding, it'd do the world a lot of good.
I definitely agree with you there, Del. Anyone that has the ability to have faith in something and do good things in the name of it, I have a lot of respect for. It's just hard, like not ragging on anyone who's Christian, not putting anyone down for that, because it is a very respectable thing, but it's hard to see a lot of people, because we see a lot of people every day try and twist the Bible to support their bigotry and their hate. And it's so hard for me, because if something was inherently good, how can it be used for something so bad?
Well, that's a case where my answer to that would be that's a case where you can't confuse the religion with some of its people that twist it, right? People can twist it any way they want, but at its heart, that's not what it's about, you know. That's my response. That's my response to that, at least.
I agree with that, Dr. Yeager. And as far as that goes, like, I often question my preacher, even like sometimes if I hear him say something that I don't necessarily agree with, or his sermon is kind of out of line, I'll just turn it off and I'll go listen to someone else, because I can't, like, if I feel in my heart that it's wrong, if I go study it later and it's right, then I'm like, well, whatever, at least I've learned from that questioning. You know, like, I question my faith a lot just because I want to grow in it, or, you know, figure out like, this is really what I believe, this is why I believe it. And I think that for anyone that has faith in anything, you should question it, because that's the only way it's going to get stronger. Or yeah, so that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, let me bring up something I think is unique to this situation real quick. I've got a brother-in-law who goes to church. Now, he doesn't believe in, he's a Christian, by the way. He doesn't believe necessarily in taking the Bible literally. You know, he doesn't believe in an actual heaven and hell per se. He believes, but here's the thing, the reason I'm bringing it up is there's a lot of good morals and stories in the Bible that if they're took not quite literally, but just as learning devices, there's a lot of value in there. And, you know, and they've been able to find meaning and value in that itself, to teach, to their kids and stuff. And, to each their own. I don't know.
Yeah, this all raises the question to get back to the text, but does God in the poem set Satan up to fail? That's a question to, like, is Satan created in a way that God knows that he's going to rebel? Arguably so, right? He gives
100% so.
Gives him this characteristic of pride. Right? What do you guys think of Satan's pride in book 1 and 2? He's clearly got a lot of it, right? Pride is often the downfall of characters in epic poems. Like in the Iliad, Achilles is famously known for his pride, right? And that comes back to to bite him, to say the least. Right? His pride even gets many people killed in the Trojan War because he's playing butthurt, right, over his concubine getting taken away. So, you guys enjoy his pride, or did you feel like he had a right to be prideful? Is it the fact that God even gives him the characteristic to be prideful? Is that setting him up to fail? Like, is that Satan's program? Think about it like a robot, right? Say God, if Satan's a robot, right? God's given Satan the ability to feel prideful.
I think I definitely agree with Dale. I think that it was 100% set up that way, to serve God's purpose and to give humans something to overcome. But I think that the pride that Satan has is unjustified. I think that self-pride, just because, is a really bad thing a lot of the times. Being proud in an accomplishment, being proud of something you've done, being proud of something you've changed in yourself, I don't think that's harmful. It's good to have pride in things that you work for. But simply having pride just because, oh, I'm the best, I was made the best, I'm the prettiest, I'm the best, and I'm proud of that. Something that you have had no hand in. I think that is really, really egotistical.
Which is pretty much what he does here, right? He's Lucifer, right? He's the angel of light. So he is very prideful about his appearance and his status. That's something we mentioned as well before too, right? The great chain of being, even within like angels, they had hierarchies of angels, right? Satan is the archangel, right? He's one of the most powerful ones.
I read in one of the
Michael's mentioned in this too one time, and I thought that passage was really cool because I think Mamnon's talking, and he talks about how they couldn't really suffer another defeat. They talk and how much they feared Michael, and it's pronounced Michael. I think it says it has 3 syllables. Thought that was neat. But see, they dreaded worse than hell so much the fear of thunder and the sword of Michael wrought still within them, and no less desire. That was cool because he's right there on the power level of Satan. He's an archangel too.
Yeah, I think they said could we, or it's like who could withstand the wrath of Michael, or could we withstand something like that. But I really thought that was a good portion of the text as well, Dell. And I read in a footnote that even though there are specific hierarchies of the angels, those aren't really prescribed to in this text. Like they'll refer to one as a seraphim, even though that's not the exact rank that demon or that fallen angel was.
Now, seraphim are different than that. There's different. That's a different class.
And the reading for next time, Satan actually impersonates a cherub, which is a significant downstep from archangel. Yeah, so I don't know. Did you guys, when he says stuff in the poem like it's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, right? The mind is its own place and can make a heaven of hell, hell of heaven. right? Or some of you guys over there are like, hell yeah, right? It's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, right? Any of you guys on that side of the fence?
Personally, yeah. I can't deny I have a little, thread of anarchists through me. And I always love to root for the bad guy if, they're not like inherently evil. If they're not out killing babies or doing like really horrible things, I'm like, hell yeah, get it. Take the power.
Yeah, see where I don't prescribe to this idea that any of this is actually real. I'm there with you. I like your rebellious streak. It's funny, but yeah, the reason I think this makes sense when he says it's better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven is because Satan can actually say that, and it actually has meaning to it. If it was anybody else but him, there's really not much significance. But he actually would be reigning in hell. He's the epitome of the de facto ruler. He's above and beyond the rest of them.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that, throughout the first book, it was really made seem like God wasn't justified in being ruler. Like that's what it made it seem like. It seemed like, oh, what had he ever done that made him the best out of all of us? Like that's how I felt for a lot of it. Whenever it talked about, how Satan was the one who got up and who I'll be to go to earth and I'll be the one to do this. And really it was a lot of just like them feeling like God hadn't done enough as a leader and hadn't done anything to deserve that.
Yeah, I see. I think it's hard to be on either side of that, and that's why I really hope going forward. Dr. Yeager says that it goes back to heaven, to the war, because I need to see a lot more commentary on what actually set this off. Because right now it just seems like they're being petty. I mean, it really does. So hopefully this evolves into something that actually has some gravitas to it and some meaning. Because right now they just seem petty to me. They have no argument really, other than they felt slighted somehow.
Honestly, it brings me back to my theater days when the people who didn't get the leads and who got the ensemble roles would scheme and decide to throw off the whole play because they didn't get the lead.
That's about right. That's about right as far as Satan's motivations in book 5. If you guys notice too, going back to this question at the very beginning of the poem, Satan and the other fallen angels are chained in hell. They're chained into the lake of fire, but then God unshackles the chains. So like that almost took an action of God to unshackle the chains, to even let them loose, to start these plans. Otherwise, they would have just been shackled down. So it just kind of goes to show that they're God's playthings in a way here. Right?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot about that. And they weren't even conscious before that. Like Satan's kind of waking them all up, if I remember.
Yeah, God.
I have a quick question, something to kind of.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was just wondering, Nicole had said, that she kind of roots for the bad guy if, whatever they're doing isn't too bad. For me to think about this scripturally, like the Bible says not to cast the first stone until you take the stick out of your own eye, which to me, all sins amount to be the same. Like, you can murder, you can lie to God, they're on the same level. So just, I don't know. I guess my question is, how do you kind of perceive what sin is worse than the other? Because to me, I do believe in God and I do believe in my faith. So I kind of try to look at sin all the same, I guess.
I definitely see what you mean, Kara. For me, as far as the book goes, and it's hard because, I try to remember that in my day-to-day life, and I try not to judge people differently because, like you said, in God's eyes, it's all the same. If you do something bad, it's just as bad as someone who murders somebody, For me, as far as the book goes, it's like how much harm you're doing to people, like how much direct harm. That's how I'm looking at it as far as the book goes. And a question that I kind of had is, in this book, if they, if God is a loving being in this book, like he is in Christianity, and if he still loves the angels that have fallen, that's a big question that I had. Like, if he still really wants them to repent, if he wants them to do better. And, like you said, Dale, I'm excited to see when they get back in heaven and actually see what things are like up there and get both sides of the story.
Hey, speaking of God really still loves them, just to mention this real quick, there's an author named Wayne Barlow. He explores this very idea. A lot of his books take place in hell, and it's actually like redemption of some of these archangels. It's really fascinating stuff.
I'll definitely have to look at that. I just kind of wanted to pick her brain and see what she thought about that, because that's kind of the way that I think about things, or try to at least.
On that note, Kara, I've always heard that sin is sin. It doesn't matter how you think about it, like sin is sin. So basically that means all sin is the same. Like, it's just as bad to lie as it is to kill someone.
Right.
Yeah, that's hard to wrap your head around. That makes
it really is. I agree 100%. It really is. Like, when I tell a little white lie, I don't feel like I'm killing anybody, but I mean, based on scripture and what I believe, I kind of have to like really like set myself down and tell myself, okay, like I have to be a little more careful.
Yeah, and to add to what I was saying, I also, like, as far as thinking about sin in the book goes, I also try to remember that everything Satan does is still fulfilling God's plan. Like, no matter what he's doing, it's still fulfilling his plan, and that honestly helps me have a little bit more sympathy for him.
I think your sympathy will run out as this epic goes forward.
It definitely could. I think it probably is going to eventually.
Yeah, they debate in the next part of the text, why can mankind be redeemed by Christ, but why can't the angels? They actually answer that question in the poem for next time. So that's something that we will be talking about next time for sure.
Is it because the angels have actually been in God's presence and the humans haven't?
No, that's not the reason.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, this next part's going to be when the stuff gets really interesting. Like, God exists outside of the realm of space and time too. That's something else that we have to consider, right? God is not bound by temporality. So like, he can see everything that's going to happen ever, and whereas Satan is sort of bound by temporality. So God sees everything as it's going to be. This is the predestination God in the poem, where he knows everything that's going to happen. Right. So
the predestination God, that is God.
Right.
I mean, he's omnipotent, and if he's not, then he's not the Christian God that people are familiar with.
The omniscient part, omnipotent, omniscient, right? God's omniscient. He knows everything that's going to happen. So I'll be interested to see what you guys have to think next time with regards to that. In book 3, God says, I know Adam and Eve are going to fall. Right? Why can we forgive them? So this is even ahead before Adam and Eve do fall. I know they're going to fall. Why can they be forgiven, but why can't Satan?
I am honestly really excited to read the portions that involve Adam and Eve, because I know there's a big discussion amongst Christians where it's like, some people view it as, oh, darn, Adam and Eve, we could be in the garden, we could be at total peace. But there's the other side where it's Adam and Eve fell so that we might be, and so that we might experience joy. Because while they were in the garden, they couldn't discern joy from sadness. So they really were just kind of monotone. And while it wasn't bad, it wasn't good either.
One last question I want to leave you guys on is, you're going to get an introduction to Adam and Eve in book 4. Question I'll be curious to know. We talked about Satan. Was he set up to fail? Ask the same question about Eve for next time. Was Eve set up to fail? we get the account of her creation. So like you guys will see. You guys will see. Once you read it, you guys will see why that question's relevant.
Do you want us to answer it now, or is that just something to think on until next time?
Something to think on for next time. Yeah, because you'll get the introduction to Eve in book 4. And once you read the introduction to Eve, you'll see why I asked that question.
Can I get some information on that essay prompt that I think Kara was talking about at the start of class?
Yeah, I'm going to post it to a Blackboard here in just a second.
When is that going to be due?
Let me look at my prompt again really quick.
I think you said Friday is when it's due.
Like this Friday?
I think that's what he said on.
Let me double check. I might give you guys a little bit more time since I was late to post the prompt. Yeah. Let's make it due Monday a week from now. Monday a week from now. So I'll give you guys a long weekend to do it too. Okay, Monday a week from now. It'll be due.
It's a short essay in the style of the last one.
You got 3 questions on there. One's about class, one's about gender, and one's about salvation and Dr. Faustus. Those are the 3 questions you can pick from. Yeah, we'll make that next Monday. I will edit and update the Blackboard where it says next Monday. Yeah, since I forgot to post the prompts. So, okay. Anything else? All right, so good conversations today. I knew we would have a good one about this. I knew we would, right? So we'll see you guys next time. Book 3 and 4.
3 and 4. Okay.